Every morning, the same train, the same route, the same faces, until the day the familiar became a trap. Jordan had taken the same route for 3 years. 7:15 train, fourth car, seat by the window if available. The routine was armor against the chaos of city life, predictable, reliable, safe. The morning started like every other. Coffee black, toast barely warm out the door by 7:05. The October air bit at Jordan's cheeks as they descended into Grand Central Station, joining the river of commuters flowing toward the platforms. But something felt off as soon as Jordan stepped onto the concourse. The ceiling seemed higher than usual. Not dramatically, just enough to make them glance up, squinting at the familiar constellation of lights that somehow felt more distant. The information board flickered in peripheral vision, and when Jordan turned to check the platform number, the digits swam slightly before settling. Platform 19. Same as always. Jordan walked the familiar path, dodging coffee-clutching office workers and early-rising tourists. But the footsteps echoed strangely, as if the space around them had grown larger overnight. The platform stretched ahead, and Jordan found themselves counting steps without meaning to. 23, 24. It usually took 18 steps to reach the preferred waiting spot. The platform felt longer. The yellow warning strip seemed to curve slightly where it should have been straight. Jordan shook their head, blaming tired eyes and Monday morning fog. They'd been working late all week. Stress did things to perception. Other commuters moved around with their usual zombie-like focus, earbuds in, phones glowing. Nobody else seemed to notice anything different. A woman in a red coat stood exactly where she always stood. The businessman with the leather briefcase checked his watch at the same spot. Everything normal. Everything routine. The train arrived with its familiar screech of brakes, but the sound seemed to come from deeper in the tunnel than usual. The headlight appeared around the bend later than expected, as if the curve had grown sharper, the tunnel longer. Jordan stepped forward with the crowd, muscle memory guiding them to the fourth car. The doors hissed open. They found their usual seat, window side, facing forward, and settled in with a newspaper. As the train pulled away from the platform, Jordan glanced back through the window. The station receded into darkness faster than it should have. The lights became pinpricks, then vanished entirely, as if the tunnel behind them had simply closed. Jordan turned back to the newspaper, but the words wouldn't focus. The rhythm of the wheels on tracks felt wrong. Not quite the steady clack-clack they knew, but something more irregular. Clack-clack, pause. Clack-clack, pause. Like a heartbeat. Jordan looked around the car. Same faces as always. The woman with the blue purse. The teenager with paint-stained fingers. The elderly man who always fell asleep before the third stop. But as Jordan studied them more carefully, something cold settled in their stomach. They weren't looking out the windows. Nobody was watching the stations pass. Everyone stared straight ahead or down at their devices, as if the world outside the train had ceased to exist, as if they knew not to look. The first station came and went without an announcement. Jordan pressed their face to the window, expecting to see the familiar green tiles of Park Avenue, but the platform was different. Longer. The tiles were the wrong color, a sickly yellow that seemed to pulse under the fluorescent lights. Jordan waited for the conductor's voice. The routine next stop, 51st Street. The only sound was that irregular heartbeat rhythm of wheels on tracks. Clack, claws. Clack, claws. Jordan pulled out their phone to check the time, but the screen showed only static where the clock should be. They tried opening the map app, but it refused to load. No signal, the phone claimed, though they'd never lost service on this route before. The next station appeared in the darkness ahead. Jordan leaned forward, expecting the familiar blue tiles of 51st Street. But as they pulled in, they saw something impossible. The platform stretched further than any subway platform should, curving away into shadows. The station name was painted on the wall, but the letters seemed to shift when Jordan wasn't looking directly at them. 51st E, and then something else. 51st E. No, that wasn't right either. None of the other passengers moved to get off. They sat in perfect stillness, staring at nothing. The woman with the blue purse breathed too slowly. The teenager hadn't blinked once since Jordan started watching. Doors didn't open. The train lurched forward again, diving back into darkness. The tunnel wall seemed closer now, pressing in from both sides. When Jordan looked out the window, they could see their own reflection superimposed over moving shadows that shouldn't exist in an empty tunnel. The third station was wrong from the moment it came into view. The platform was too high, level with the windows instead of below them. The tiles formed patterns that made Jordan's eyes water if they tried to follow them. And there were too many exits. Staircases led up and down, and in directions that defied the geometry of the space. This should have been 42nd Street, Times Square, the most familiar stop in the city. Jordan stood abruptly, their seat creaking in the silence. "Excuse me," they said to the woman with the blue purse. She didn't respond, didn't even glance in their direction. Jordan walked to the front of the car, then the back, looking for the conductor, for anyone who might explain what was happening. But every car was the same. Passengers sitting in perfect silence, staring at nothing, breathing too slowly. When Jordan returned to their seat, it was facing the wrong direction. They'd been sitting forward. Now the seat faced backward, toward the rear of the train. But Jordan hadn't touched it. No one had moved while they were gone. The other passengers remained exactly as they'd left them, frozen in their strange stillness. The train began to slow again. Through the window, Jordan saw another platform approaching. This one made of what looked like raw concrete, unfinished and crude. Pipes ran along the walls, dripping something dark onto tracks that extended far beyond where they should have ended. The speakers crackled to life for the first time since Jordan had boarded. "Next stop," a voice said, but it wasn't the conductor's familiar tone. It was higher, strained, as if the speaker was trying not to scream. "Next stop, deeper. Please stand clear of the closing doors." The doors had never opened. Jordan gripped a handle beside their seat as the train lurched to a complete stop. In the sudden silence, no wheel rhythm, no engine hum. They could hear something else, breathing, not from the passengers around them, but from somewhere outside. From the darkness beyond the windows, something was breathing in the tunnel. The doors finally opened with a sound like tearing metal. Jordan didn't want to get off, but staying felt worse. The other passengers hadn't moved. They sat like mannequins, and in the fluorescent light spilling from the platform, Jordan could see that the woman with the blue purse wasn't blinking. Her eyes had gone completely white. Jordan stumbled onto the platform, and the doors slammed shut behind them immediately. The train pulled away without pause, disappearing into a tunnel that curved sharply to the left. Impossible, since this line ran straight through Manhattan. The platform was enormous. It stretched in both directions far beyond what any underground station should contain, disappearing into darkness that seemed to swallow the overhead lights. The walls were covered in tiles, but they were wrong. Too many patterns, colors that shifted when Jordan wasn't looking directly at them. There were no exit signs, no maps, no benches or trash cans or any of the usual subway infrastructure. Just an endless concrete platform and the tracks, which split and multiplied as they extended into the darkness, creating a web of rails that hurt to look at. Jordan called out, "Hello?" Their voice echoed strangely, as if the space were both massive and confined at the same time. "Is anyone here?" The echo came back wrong. Instead of Jordan's voice, they heard whispers, dozens of them, overlapping and urgent. Words they couldn't quite make out, in a language that might have been English but felt foreign on their ears. Jordan started walking, following the platform toward what they hoped was an exit. Their footsteps rang out in the emptiness, but underneath them, they could hear other sounds. Footsteps that didn't match their rhythm. Footsteps that stopped when they stopped, started when they started. After what felt like hours, but could have been minutes, Jordan found a stairway leading up. No sign indicated where it led, but anything was better than the platform. The stairs were metal and concrete, institutional and familiar, but they went up much longer than they should have. 20 steps, 50, 100, still climbing. At step 137, Jordan found a door marked authorized personnel only. It was unlocked. Beyond the door was a maintenance corridor lit by bare bulbs hanging from exposed cables. The air smelled of ozone and something organic, like decay. Water dripped from pipes overhead, forming puddles that reflected the lights in ways that made the floor seem unstable. Jordan had no choice but to follow the corridor. It branched and split like the tracks below, creating a maze of identical passages. Sometimes they passed other doors, some locked, others standing open to reveal rooms full of outdated subway equipment, vintage turnstiles, and signs for stations that didn't exist. In one room, Jordan found a wall covered in missing person posters. Dozens of them, all commuters like themselves. All last seen on morning trains that never reached their destinations. The dates went back years. That's when Jordan saw their own face looking back from a poster near the bottom. Jordan Thompson, it read. Last seen October 15th, 7:15 a.m. train. But today was October 15th. Jordan had boarded the train less than an hour ago. Footsteps echoed from the corridor behind them, not their own rhythm this time, but something else. Multiple sets of feet moving in perfect synchronization. Getting closer. Jordan ran. The corridors seemed to shift around them as they fled, passages appearing and disappearing, doors opening onto staircases that led up or down, or in directions that shouldn't exist. Behind them, the synchronized footsteps continued, never getting closer but never falling behind. Ahead, a faint glow appeared. Natural light, daylight, an exit. Jordan burst through the exit door and found themselves on a sidewalk they'd never seen before. The sun was setting, though it should have been morning rush hour. The street signs were familiar, 42nd and Broadway, but the buildings were wrong. Too tall, casting shadows that fell in impossible directions. Jordan's phone finally showed signal. The time read 6:47 p.m. 10 hours had passed. Jordan called in sick to work, claiming food poisoning. Their supervisor was annoyed. Jordan had missed an important meeting, but they couldn't explain what had really happened. Who would believe them? That night, Jordan researched missing commuters. Found databases of people who'd simply vanished from subway trains, never arriving at their destinations. The numbers were staggering. Hundreds over the past decade, all during morning and evening rush hours. All creatures of habit who'd taken the same routes for years. Jordan didn't take the train for a week. They walked to work instead, 45 minutes each way, arriving exhausted and staying late to avoid the evening rush. But walking wasn't sustainable long-term, and eventually Jordan convinced themselves it had been a hallucination. Stress-induced, psychosis, a mental break. They needed the routine back, the familiar rhythm of normal life. On Monday morning, Jordan descended into Grand Central again. The platform looked normal. 18 steps to their waiting spot. The yellow warning strip ran straight and true. The businessman with the leather briefcase stood in his usual place, checking his watch. The woman in the red coat waited where she always waited. But as Jordan studied the crowd, they noticed things they'd missed before. How still everyone stood. How they avoided looking at the tunnel mouths. How nobody checked the station maps or seemed concerned about delays. The train arrived on time. Jordan boarded the fourth car and found their seat. Window side, facing forward. Everything exactly as it should be. As they pulled away from the platform, Jordan forced themselves to look out the window. The station receded normally. The tunnel walls stayed the proper distance apart. The rhythm of the wheels was steady, familiar. Clack, 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 clack. No pause. Jordan exhaled slowly and opened their newspaper. The routine was back. Everything was normal. Then they noticed the young woman across the aisle. She was new. Jordan had never seen her before. She kept glancing around nervously, checking her phone, looking out the windows as stations passed. She had the restless energy of someone riding an unfamiliar route, someone breaking from routine. At the third stop, she stood up suddenly and moved toward the doors, then hesitated and sat back down. She pulled out her phone and stared at the screen, frowning. Jordan watched her growing dread. They recognized the expression on her face, confusion, the first hint of fear, the realization that something was wrong, but not knowing what. Jordan wanted to warn her, wanted to tell her to get off at the next stop, to take the stairs up and out, to never ride the same route twice. But the words wouldn't come, because deep down, Jordan understood now. They were part of the routine, part of the familiar faces that made new riders feel safe, right up until they realized that none of the familiar faces ever got off. The train dove into darkness, carrying them all deeper, and Jordan sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead, breathing too slowly.